All right, spring training games are underway. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. says everything's fine. Everyone's fine. I'll talk to whoever you want. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Blue Jays, your daily Toronto Blue Jays podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jays. Thank you for making Locked On Blue Jays your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. We're the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. As always, I'm Braden Wasco. He's Carter First. You can find us on Twitter, Braden5Wasco. Carter First, too, as well on Instagram and TikTok at Locked On Blue Jays. If you're new here to YouTube or you're listening anywhere else, make sure you do hit the subscribe button. It really does help us out. Keeps us to the top of your guys' page. You guys can get your podcast, live stream, shorts, videos, everything right there on YouTube. As well, Discord link is down in the description, so you guys can join that. Talk Blue Jays with us any time of day. Lot to get into, Carter. Lot to get into with spring training games now underway. Storylines are starting to show themselves. Where will this team be successful? Where will they not? Where are we going to have to look at for other options? And who's going to make teams? Who's going to show out their stuff? We'll get into all of that. There is a Blue Jays signing, which we'll have to get into, one that I know me and you have talked about quite a bit, but we have to start with the I don't want to say big news because it's not, but it is the Vladimir Guerrero Jr. of it all, I guess. I guess I'll start it here. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. doesn't want to talk contracts or anything anymore. He just wants to focus on baseball, but then is right willing to go talk about the contract and next free agency. I thought we were leaving this in the past. It's just sort of ridiculous, I find, but whatever. We'll get into this. Here's the quote from Vladimir Guerrero Jr. If I go to free agency, every team, all 30 teams are going to have the opportunity to sit down with me to talk with me. I'm okay with everything. It's in the past. Obviously, talking about the Yankees, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. has had a problem with the Yankees throughout most of his career. We know he he said he would never become a Yankee, blah, blah, blah in the past. Comes down to two things. He was treated poorly as a child there when he went with his dad. And second of all, there was a offer to his dad that ended up, the contract negotiations went sideways and just has always had a bad taste in his mouth. But is now saying, it's fine. Pretty much whoever gives me the money, I'll go there. I don't know, man. How do you feel about all this?
It's not great because obviously the Yankees being probably the biggest rival in the Toronto Blue Jays division. That's my least favorite team in all of baseball, the New York Yankees. So as a fan, obviously I do not want to see Vladimir Guerrero Jr. talking any sort of positivity about our division rival. And it's completely different from where he was at in 2022. You kind of said there is a little bit of a backstory with this Vladimir Guerrero Jr. stuff. So I actually got the quote from what he said in 2022. So he says, I'd like to play in New York. I'd like to kill the Yankees. I would never sign with the Yankees, not even when I'm dead. He had said that on multiple occasions and echoed, obviously this is in the article that I have here, echoed that he would not even consider the Yankees. And he goes on to say, it goes back to my family. That's my decision, and I will never change that. And just like that, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. going into, obviously, his last season under contract with the Toronto Blue Jays, looks like he has changed that a little bit. Is this maybe a tactic to allow all 30 teams to be in the talks in free agency? New York Yankees obviously going to be linked to Vladimir Guerrero Jr. We saw that this offseason with Anthony Santander. It's very beneficial, obviously, for teams within your division. Go get one of your best players, add them to your team, because not only is that team losing one of their superstars, obviously Vladdy, best player on the Toronto Blue Jays. If he goes to the New York Yankees, makes the Toronto Blue Jays significantly worse, makes the New York Yankees a whole lot better. But this is some stuff that, again, we didn't necessarily want to talk about, didn't necessarily think we'd be talking about, especially when Vladimir Guerrero Jr. goes out and says that deadline. But Vladdy also got caught over the weekend. They saw one of the fans in the Toronto Blue Jays world saw that Vladimir Guerrero Jr. liked a post with him in a New York Yankees jersey. For a guy that doesn't want to bring distractions to his team in 2025, he's not really doing that good of a job of it to start this spring training off.
No, dude, you know what? I'm sick of talking about it. I'm sure, I don't know how many of our videos in the past week and a half, our podcast, have been solely talking about Vladimir Guerrero Jr. taking away the attention from guys that we should be paying attention to within the offseason to see how this team looks. Don't get me wrong. It's a big extension. They wanted to get it done. We had to cover it. Everybody had to talk about it because if it does get done, that's amazing. And now we're sitting here sort of with our pants around our ankles because there's no signing, and he's going and liking stuff from other teams and random posts. And I've sort of changed my opinion a little bit. Before it was, why didn't the front office make something happen? Why didn't they pull the trigger? Just give him what he wants. I've sort of flip-flopped because now it's seeming like Vladimir Guerrero Jr. really does want the attention. We've known that Vladimir Guerrero Jr. has wanted to be face of the franchise, Mr. Superstar. And that's great. But now it's starting to a little bit distract already from what's going on in spring training with some young stars, some signings, how this team's going to perform within the regular season. It's still all about Vladimir Guerrero Jr. And I'm a little bit done with it. And I think if stuff continues to happen like this season, I think fans are a little bit going to flip on the guy.
Well, it's just encouraging this narrative that it's kind of all about Vladdy. It's encouraging the narrative that it's going to go into this offseason and it's going to be what teams are talking about. And it's even what we're talking about as Toronto Blue Jays fans. So with spring training underway, again, it is still early on. We're not that far removed off this Vladimir Guerrero Jr. deadline. So maybe you can chalk this a little bit up to that, but he's kind of going out of his way to bring this back into the light of the fans again, obviously by going out, liking different teams' pictures while you're still on the Toronto Blue Jays. Again, it's fully within his right, obviously. If he gets to that next free agency, if he gets to the offseason, he can go talk to any single team that he wants, whether it's the Toronto Blue Jays, whether it's the Yankees, the Red Sox, the Dodgers, you name it, that is fully his right. But that is still a very long time away. And a guy that I said so many times, I want to stay with the Blue Jays. I do not want this to be a distraction. I get it is early on in spring training. Hopefully this isn't a narrative that we keep having discussing on and on and on as we progress through the spring training. But it seems like the narrative is switching a little bit towards that. The hate was going towards the front office. Everyone was saying the Ross Atkins needs to extend this guy. Can't believe they still have not extended this guy. And there still is that narrative there. And I think that's still kind of where we are at. But before it was like a 95-5 where it was 5% on Vladdy's side, or sorry, the front office side being like, yeah, probably don't extend Vladdy. And now this narrative is changing a little bit with all the stuff that has been leaking, has been coming out. Again, it is a lot of speculation, but it seems like this narrative is starting to change towards maybe we should let Vladimir Guerrero Jr. play the season out if he wants to get that $550, $600 million. If we're going to sign him to this massive contract extension, that's probably going to end up as him being the third highest paid player in all of baseball. It might not be the worst idea to let him kind of, go out this year and put up those big numbers in his contract year.
Yeah, I had guys. I went out to we had beer league hockey last night, and I went out there, and a lot of guys kept asking me. Some Blue Jays fans, a lot of Blue Jays fans all over the country, obviously, asking me sort of what I thought about the whole Vladdy situation. And I think, yeah, Carter, you're right in the sense that I think the blame, or not the blame, but who the fans believe and who, what the offer is, who's in the right, who's in the wrong. It's starting to switch. I was about 50-50 with the people that I talked to about Vlad's asking for a ridiculous amount of money. He's making it all about him. And then the other side of it is, well, they probably should have paid him years ago and this all would have been fine, which are both sort of true. And that's the position that we're put in now as fans and, people that run a Blue Jays podcast. We try to make, we want to be opinionated. We want to have an opinion on something, but with us and everybody else, nobody necessarily has all the answers. Nobody has all the facts. And that's a problem because now, I think the fan base is a little bit divided. And that's a brutal thing to have in a season that could end up being very, very important for not only the young talent on this team, but this franchise and this organization as a whole.
It's very hard to stay mad at Vladimir Guerrero Jr. because, again, it is spring training. It is the first day. It is what it is. But Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is playing on that first day. And what does he do? Absolutely smacks a backside single, scores the first run for the Toronto Blue Jays in spring training. So there's obviously the talks off the field. There's all this off the field stuff. But when you do see Vladdy in the flesh, you do see Vladdy playing baseball, whether it's against a single A starter, whether it's against a triple A starter, whether it's against Carlos Rodon, obviously on Saturday that he hit that single off of. it's going to be very encouraging, very exciting to see Vladimir Guerrero Jr. playing baseball for the Toronto Blue Jays, and playing like the Vladdy that we are accustomed to seeing in 2024.
Yeah, Carter, you know what? Let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We want to get into some spring training updates, news, what we thought about the game, sort of all of that, because it was the first weekend, and we'll get into our thoughts and feelings as well. Also, we will cover on what's going on with Addison Barger and his injury, plus the new Blue Jays signing. So a lot still to get into. Stick around right after this break. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. You guys know I talk about FanDuel all the time because it is my place to place my bets. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on the fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live game bets into a same-game parlay. I do this all the time. I've been not doing so well recently, and that's why sometimes their pre-made ones are the way to go, because a lot of people know better than I do. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. I'm telling you guys, the bonus bets is like free money. Make sure you do take advantage of that offer. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So, Carter, lots to get into from spring training. We will get into sort of thoughts, feelings, how you feel about spring training as a whole. But the first thing we got to address is obviously a guy that has looked fantastic. You know, I don't know if you've seen the pictures online. Addison Barger has been looking huge. Like, I don't know what this guy's been doing in the gym, but he looks massive. He looks ready to go for spring training. And then Addison Barger took a Garrett Crochet pitch off the hand and knob of the bat in the first and suffered a hand contusion. That was released by Shia Davidi. Comes back. John Schneider says x-rays on Addison Barger were negative. He will likely get a day off tomorrow, but not expect to be sidelined for long. So that's good to know. Hopefully this guy will have a full spring training to get right back into the action, because with the size and everything that he's put on, we could be seeing a really good Addison Barger this year. Again, does that help him? He was a power hitter before. Is he going to continue being a power hitter? Yes. It's just, can he do it more often? That's the one thing we're looking at from Addison Barger, I think, going into this spring training, Carter.
Yeah, it's obviously nice to see Addison Barger, like, looking, like you said, absolutely jacked. But when you're looking at Addison Barger, when you look at his player profile, it's just raw power. That's the first thing you see. Not the most mechanically sound guy of all time. So putting on that muscle, in theory, obviously should be a benefit to him going forward. But I'm more looking to see what his swing is like, how he kind of cleaned up that swing, what he's looking to do differently, obviously, this upcoming season, as we saw his short tenure with the Toronto Blue Jays in 2024. Not exactly what we were looking for. With a crowded infield right now, a lot of young players showing out, a lot of young players hoping to have take some steps towards having a productive season in 2025. Maybe some guys that can take that extra step, like we saw from Spencer Horwitz in 2024. There is some opportunity to do that with a lot of young players within this Toronto Blue Jay system. But initially, when we saw this news, I couldn't get the game up in the first 2-3 innings. I think a lot of people, this was like a narrative on Twitter, storyline going on, just could not pull up the game for some reason. So I didn't actually see the clip of Addison Barger getting hit. I don't think there is one. I don't think it was televised at that time. Maybe you guys can point that out in our comment section if there was one. But at the time, it sounded like it was like a hand fracture. It was going to be this 6 to 8 week thing. It was going to be this major injury. So it was very nice to see that it's just probably a very aggressive bruise that Addison Barger has. But instead of that 6 to 8 week timetable, probably only going to be a week or so.
Yeah, maybe not even that. It could be one game. It could be 2 games. So we will see Addison Barger very quickly return to the Toronto Blue Jays, which is excellent to see. Again, yeah, I was scared when I first saw that pop up. Alarm bells started to ring, and I'm like, oh my goodness, are we about to have a spring training like last year where guys sort of fall off the face of the map with injuries? So pray to God that doesn't happen. A bunch of other great things to get into, not just Addison Barger, but or bad things, I guess, for Addison Barger. But Blue Jays bring back Ryan Yarbrough. A couple of you guys mentioned in the comment section and in our Discord on the Friday episode. Ryan Yarbrough back to a minor league deal, will be fighting for a position within this bullpen. Now, there are a couple theories about what could be going on with this Ryan Yarbrough signing. Now, do they bring him back as maybe the more of a long man? And we had Skylar Peters actually point out that he thinks that he is going to be the long man, pushing Yariel Rodriguez to almost a sixth man in the rotation, sort of getting spot starts. Now, I don't necessarily love that idea. I know some people are very high on Yarbrough and being the long man and having Yariel, not putting that long man pressure on Yariel Rodriguez. But that's where we've seen Yariel succeed. So are you sort of on the same page with me, or are you sort of more side with Mr. Peters?
I don't want to see a six-man rotation whatsoever. So I don't want Yariel just kind of slotting in as the extra guy. I don't really see the much benefit to that six-man rotation. I think all the guys in front of Yariel are probably destined to have better seasons than Yariel Rodriguez. But I don't mind the idea of having Ryan Yarbrough as that long man out of the bullpen. I think if you can use Yariel as maybe a more traditional bullpen arm, maybe he slots down a little bit high into higher leverage, as we've seen Yariel Rodriguez in his Japan League in 2022. That is where he absolutely flourished. Again, had that season off in 2023. So it is a little bit removed from that season in Japan. Obviously, the different leagues as well. The MLB, a little bit better of a hitting league, obviously, than it is in Japan. So there is a step that he needs to take. But with how effective Ryan Yarbrough was last season, just going over the stats of the Toronto Blue Jays, 31 and a third innings pitched, had 18 hits, only 2 home runs given up, 27 strikeouts to 7 walks, a 2.01 ERA, and a .8 WHIP. The only thing with Ryan Yarbrough is that this guy does not throw very hard. So again, is he going to come with the Toronto Blue Jays this year and post that 2 ERA once again? I'll be the first one to tell you, absolutely not. That is probably not going to happen in the case of Ryan Yarbrough, but this is a nice depth signing. Again, injuries do happen, as we saw with Addison Barger in the second game. Stuff is going to happen throughout the baseball season. So this is one of the things that we can obviously watch out for in spring training. There's a bunch of depth now that the Toronto Blue Jays bullpen does have. There's some guys that are going to be battling for that 8th spot, and Ryan Yarbrough has to be in that discussion at this point.
Yeah, I think you really got to give a hat tip to this front office when you're talking about the Toronto Blue Jays bullpen going into 2025. I agree. I think the biggest problem last season was they didn't have depth. When there was a big time injury or a bigger injury that occurred, they didn't really have anybody to fall back on. Now, with Yimi Garcia, Chad Green, Hoffman, Yariel, Yarbrough, Brennan Little, and then you got still a ton of guys that are still there to try to prove themselves to secure what we originally thought could be that 8th spot. Now probably looking like Ryan Yarbrough, but still a little bit up in the air for some different people to move around. So yeah, I think you really got to be happy with what this front office has been able to do this offseason in turning a bullpen that was horrible last year into what looks like to have some potential here.
Yeah, I'll give him a little bit of flowers, but I'm not going to go full out and say that this bullpen is completely revamped until I see these guys pitch, until I see the start of the regular season. A lot of these guys haven't even stepped foot on a mound yet. We haven't seen them, obviously, in a long time. Are they going to take these massive regressive steps? Like, the only one I really have is Chad Green regressing going into 2025. I think Jeff Hoffman's going to be very reliable. Eric Swanson should be a reliable guy. You do have a lot more options, whereas last year, you're really hoping on some guys to continue their success that they did have in 2023. That happened? Absolutely not. So now in that case where you do have a little bit of regression, you do have maybe Ryan Yarbrough as a guy that takes that step back. Maybe it's Chad Green. Maybe Nick Sandlin isn't the guy that you think he is. Whatever it does end up being, you do have some other options in AAA that probably can have this plug and play apparatus. Like regarding it, you can just easily throw these guys in. Whereas last year you had Yari Rodriguez as a replacement. You had Jose Cuas, who did the unthinkable, 3 pitches, 3 straight base runners. Now, if there is some injuries, I'm more comfortable relying on guys like Josh Walker, your Ryan Burrs, maybe a Tommy Nance, those type of guys compared to the guys that we previously were relying on in 2024.
Yeah, Carter. Yeah, I mean, we can talk about the bullpen for days, but you're right. We haven't seen any of these guys really throw yet. So I think watching throughout the spring training, that'll be an area to keep your focus onto. But I think on another positive here, Elvis Martinez, tip of the cap. What a first showing, hitting that blast within that first game on Saturday. That was. He looked good, man. I mean, again, take it with a grain of salt. This is spring training. But it's nice to see that he's got that ability. He's the one that goes out and hits the first home run of spring training. You got to love to see that, at least for Elvis Martinez's confidence going into this year.
No, especially with the taste that is in Toronto Blue Jays' mouths after his 2024 season. We finally saw him get pulled up the Toronto Blue Jays. got one game out of him, and then you guys know how it ended. Did not see him for the rest of the season because of PEDs. So nice to see him obviously like hit a home run in his first appearance, but that was off a AAA arm. Obviously, we know Carlos Martinez can launch off a AAA pitcher. It's going to be interesting to see if he can continue to do that at the major league level. But you get a home run, you get that right away, kind of bringing the Toronto Blue Jays baseball back. That's not something that I can hate on whatsoever. I'm very high on Carlos Martinez. I want him to be successful with the Toronto Blue Jays. The defense going to be an issue. He is not a good defender whatsoever. But from the last few seasons, we have learned that we don't really need defense anymore. If we have Carlos Martinez as a DH, that is an open spot right now on the Toronto Blue Jays. That would be a great option for me there. Other than that, you might throw him at third base. I don't love that at all. So again, it's going to be interesting to see where he can fit kind of into this lineup. But again, it's good. It's only one game in spring training. You can't take too much away from it, especially being off a AAA arm. And that's kind of how I want to end this segment, is just roll it back into this. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of spring training storylines. There's a lot of spring training performances that we can see. But it is spring training. They could be facing a single A hitter one inning, and then they could be facing an MLB talent the next inning. So kind of where are you at with how much validity are you taking from these spring training games? Some of these performances that we're going to see as spring training progresses.
Yeah. So two thoughts on this, I guess. So for the hitters, what kind of pitching are you facing? Are you facing major league talent? Or are you facing guys that are throwing in single A or double A or triple A? Those are more question marks. If they are facing somebody that knows that, is a competent starter in the MLB, then I might take away a little bit more from that. And for the pitchers, are you pitching against the New York Yankees, who are putting out a single A, high A squad? Or are you facing some more of their MLB talent? And that's what it comes down to for me. Is as exciting as spring training is for baseball to be back. I sort of get the itch back in me when spring training comes around, and you turn on Blue Jays baseball. It's something different, right? You get that feeling like, oh man, spring's coming, spring training is here. It sort of gets me thinking about playing slow pitch and golfing, and it sort of brings back those summer vibes a little bit. It's just amazing. But then you sit down, you think, and you watch some of these games, and Carter, I mean, when they removed a bunch of our big time MLB talent after the fourth inning or fifth inning or around there. In day one, I was like, ooh, this sucks. Like, this is not good baseball. So take everything a little bit with a grain of salt that you do see in spring training, but it's still baseball. It's still fun. You do get little glimpses of what maybe could happen within the regular season. So I guess I'm a little bit on the fence of how I feel about it, but I guess that's the best answer I can give you.
See, where I'm at is obviously it's very nice to see the Blue Jays absolutely tear up Carlos Rodon going to be in the Yankees rotation. That is something you can take with a little bit more validity than some of these other guys, especially in the later innings. But it's not as much about, Alan Rodon went 2 for 2, obviously, on that Sunday game. It's more so for pitchers. How are they sequencing their pitchers? How is their command? Velocity, not even really a problem, especially with the older guys. Again, it depends on, is this guy a second year in the MLB? Is he just in his rookie season? Is he in his third year? Is he in his fourth year? Or is he like Chris Bassett, who's had 15 years of baseball and he might go out there throwing 82? That's not something I'm going to be very worried about coming through spring training. A guy for Carlos Martinez, definitely nice to see him having good at-bats early. Just the quality of at-bats for the hitters. You don't want them swinging at absolute garbage. You want them having competitive at-bats. And for the pitchers, it's the same thing. It's like you don't want them missing right over the middle, giving up 4 home runs in a spring training performance. But say they have a 3-inning showing and they give up 3 runs, but it was a home run on a pitch in the dirt and it's just a good swing by the opposing hitter. So it's more so it's not as much about the stat lines. It's more so about how they're progressing kind of through these games in spring training.
Yeah, I that's sort of the same feeling. The only thing I would say to watch out for is when certain games are televised. Probably what you will see when these games get televised is the Blue Jays try to put out somewhat of a more realistic squad or some type of MLB talent so that it gives people something to watch. So, if a game is being televised, you can probably think, okay, there are probably a couple guys within this game that I want to pay attention to. So moving forward, through the spring training, if a game is on TV, it's probably one you can or maybe want to tune in for. Again, we'll see what happens. The guys might play 3 innings. They might play 4. They might play 2. But so again, watch what you want to watch. Let us know what you guys think about spring training as a whole. Sort of how much validity did you take away from it? Are you really dialed in already? Like me and Carter were sitting on the couch all weekend, dialed into some baseball. But let us know if you guys are sort of the same as we are, or you're just like, hey, until the regular season starts, I don't care. Let us know what you guys think. As well, we want to continue. We want to get more into this. Carter, I know you got some cool stats on some guys from over the weekend. So we'll talk about that when we come right back right after this short break. So I know you got a stat on Alejandro Kirk, a guy that, we love to watch. I love watching Alejandro Kirk play, and it's going to be fun watching him throughout the entire season get more and more games, as we've been told he will. Obviously being the number one catcher now. But you have a cool stat that I think the people need to hear about because it's pretty funny.
And it was funny because we were talking about this as it happened. We were just watching Alejandro Kirk's at bats against Carlos Rodon, and he was absolutely smoking the baseball. We're like, man, where have we seen that exit velocity from with Alejandro Kirk? Didn't have the numbers to back it up at that time. Then Blue Jays Muse came out with a tweet, and I found this very interesting. Again, it's going to be a storyline that maybe we can follow. Again, it being the first game, we'll see if he continues to do this throughout spring training. But Blue Jays Muse said balls hit at 109 or more miles per hour by Alejandro Kirk. In the entirety of the 2024 season, he had 4 in his first 2 at-bats in spring training. They were both over 109 miles per hour. So he's already cut that number in half, obviously, in one baseball game. It was against Carlos Rodon. So again, first game for him, obviously in spring training, very early on. It is February. So how much can we take away from this? But this is definitely a nice thing to see Alejandro Kirk smacking around the baseball, hitting it very hard as well off some MLB caliber pitchers.
Yeah, and he's the guy that we will talk about when it comes to bounce back candidates this season and guys to look out for. We are going to have our big episode on bold predictions, hot takes, I guess total predictions for the season, how things go with Dallin Wilton and Skylar Peters. So we will have a full episode breakdown of that. But Alejandro Kirk is probably going to be one of those guys, right? So I think it's very nice to see early on that he is hitting balls hard. That is something you can't just brush off at any point. There's certain things in spring training that happen that you're like, okay, that we can take with a little bit more of a grain of salt. So good there for Alejandro Kirk, as well as some housekeeping stuff. Other guys that I was a little shocked performing or that I caught my eye. Bo Bichette looked like he was hitting balls hard as well. I know we talked about Vladimir Guerrero Jr. already in the first bit, how he's hitting some balls hard. Nice to see him score, get the first RBI of the game. But Bo Bichette looked pretty good in his first couple appearances as well.
Yeah, had the most generous hit I think I've ever seen in a baseball game. Hammers a ball to the shortstop, makes a good play, but then just absolutely airmails the first baseman. Don't know how that was scored as a hit, but again, it is what it is, and that's why sometimes the stats are a little bit misleading. Again, most of the time you're not seeing a hit like that. But Bo Bichette's at bats looked like the classic Bo Bichette. Again, how much are you going to take away from this being first game of spring training? But it was nice to see Bo Bichette smacking the ball around the park a little bit. One thing that was nice as well in the Sunday game is Jake Bloss on the stadium gun. Again, it's not the actual full radar gun, but throwing 97, 98. That is pretty cool to see from a guy like Jake Bloss. And there is another thing that I kind of wanted to go into, maybe the last thing that I have for this podcast. Last year was Tim Meza. This year, Chris Bassett. Fantasy football loser. Toronto Blue Jays bat boy in the first game, the Saturday game. And this is a tweet from Hazel May. Chris Bassett finished dead last in the Blue Jays Fantasy Football League and is forced to wear his record on the back of his jersey. 4-10. Not exactly what you're looking for in fantasy football, but Chris Bassett did look hilarious being the bat boy for the Toronto Blue Jays. And speaking of fantasy, maybe we got to get some sort of punishment for our fantasy baseball league that we're going to introduce. Obviously, we want around 20 people in that league. Going to be a pretty massive league. Don't know what the punishment is necessarily going to be, but I think fantasy is just a whole lot more fun when there is something on the line, even if it is big or small. This is what I think.
I think what we should do for our fantasy baseball punishment is somebody has to go to a Blue Jays game next year, or I guess it would be at the 2026 season, and suffer through whatever team that will be. And you have to do the 999 challenge or the 9 hot dog challenge, or whatever you want to call it, at maybe a loony dog night or something like that. I don't know. We'll figure it out, but it should be a ton of fun. That was great to see. And Carter, I'm not going to lie. I think Buck said it best on the broadcast. So shout out to Buck Martinez. That if me or you, Carter, got some of those hit calls, we might be playing in the MLB ourselves right now. That was an insane score on that Bo Bichette hit, or whatever you want to call it, error, I think, but whatever. Yeah, just it was fun. It's fun to have baseball back. The fantasy league, yeah, it's going to be big, 20 people. So make sure you guys do tune in. Probably right around the first week of March. I'm going to have that set up. I've gone through a little bit of the rules. Me and Carter are going to go over a couple things just to make sure it's all, the point system and everything works out. Because I had to, with 20 people in the league, I don't think we need to be drafting 20 players each. So, we'd be drafting off some AAA teams at that point. So I've had to do some inner workings on that. So we'll get that out to you guys probably March. Pay attention. We'll throw it in the description of the podcast. Anything else, Carter? I'm tapped out. That was a lot of information on this episode, but it was good information.
Yeah, that's what comes with baseball being back. Even if it is just spring training games, again, it gets pretty hard to watch those spring training games once you get to the 6th, 7th inning. Because even we're saying, who the heck are some of these guys? And is it going to matter going into the 2025 season? A lot of the spring training stuff is not going to matter. Yusei Kikuchi was horrendous last spring training. Obviously, he's not on the team anymore, but had a very good season in Toronto. There's going to be some guys that have very good spring trainings or very poor spring trainings, and they're either going to have very good seasons or very bad seasons. Hopefully we get more of the latter, or hopefully we get somewhere in the middle where they can just, be their average self and not be, the Bo Bichette or the George Springer that we kind of saw in 2024. I just want to say thank you guys for watching. The likes, comments, subscriptions, everything recently has been appreciated. We have noticed that about 78% of you guys are not subscribed. If you are tuning in, coming back to watch all the videos, does help us out a ton. It also keeps our podcast, shorts, you name it, popping up on your For You page. Just nice to see baseball being back. Going to be very nice to see Max Scherzer in his first start for the Toronto Blue Jays, and just some of the more everyday guys making their first spring training appearance for the Jays, like Anthony Santander, another guy I'm going to be looking forward to. No matter who he's facing, no matter which pitcher it is on the mound, if he hits a bomb, that is going to be something that we can definitely get used to in Toronto.